the dynamics are changing, and I think there's a huge opportunity in the Midwest. And what we have to separate ourselves from is this idea of the California expense being the U.S. expense, and it's very different. The dynamics in like a place like Wisconsin are more akin to some of the lowest cost regions to be able to actually get high quality talent.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to episode 99 of the Sandbox.Space weekly podcast. I'm your host, Chris, joined as always by Baby Girl, who's in my lap, Pumpkin, who's over there sleeping, and every week we bring a special guest. This week's guest has been Kvalo from Midwest Games, a longtime friend and fellow warrior in the Midwest video game war here. How you doing, Ben?
I'm doing really well. Just that post GDC glow, I guess we could call it something like that.
Yeah. We in the green room we mentioned we both kind of got sick. It took us took a week or so to recover. Some of you might notice I've got a red eye. I don't know where that came from. That's a new addition to the sickness. So I don't know if it's an irritation or a blowout from coughing or whatever, but I really thought I was gonna get away with it, Ben. Up until like that Friday morning, I was feeling good, and then just finds a way of getting to you, you know?
It does. Dice got here. GDC now got me. I never get sick at events like that. My team I traveled a lot last year, and I didn't get sick at a single event in 2025.
Wow.
And the event sickness has taken its revenge in 2026 so far.
Well, hopefully, I mean we're just starting the year out. I'm sure you've got more events on your schedule for the rest of the year. So hopefully this is a exception to the rule.
I hope so. This is going to be my biggest travel year, I think, of my life, which says a lot because for 2 years, went back in my 2K days, all I did was travel. But I think I'm actually going to go to more countries this year than any other year.
Wow, nice. Yeah, that's exciting. I don't know where. I think we're planning on, assuming we get the funding organized, I think we're planning on Gamescom, Tokyo Game Show, probably one of well, I guess it would be PAX West at this point because I think we already missed PAX East, or it's about to start. I think it's this weekend, actually.
Yeah.
But then of course we also have GDEX, and then shortly after we'll have MDev. So a lot of things happening about this year. Well, let's talk about GDC a little bit. GDC I think was an interesting year. I'm sure you saw the statement that Nina put out about the attendance. So the attendance was down about 10,000. That's a pretty sizable drop in attendance, about a third compared to last year. But also it seemed like the show floor wasn't as packed as it had been in years past. I mean, I had a great time, but a lot of the events that I went to were like off-site stuff. You did a talk. I think you did at least one talk, right?
Yep, two panels.
Okay.
One on site, one off site.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I did a bunch of, I did like 4 mentor cafes, and then I did a talk. And I'd have to say your talk, if I recall, was pretty well attended. I'd say there were probably like maybe 70, 80 people there or something like that. It was pretty good number.
Yeah, the room was almost full. I think it was actually over 100.
Okay.
Yeah, the final numbers, but yeah, it was almost a completely full room.
Awesome, because I went to a few where there was maybe like 12 people in the room.
Yep.
So it was a very interesting breakdown. But what were some of your initial GDC thoughts here? You said you had a good time. It was productive and successful, but overall, what'd you think?
Yeah, GDC this year, for what I do, and I think for a lot of anything B2B, anything more around really the business of games was highly successful for the folks that attended. It was very busy. In fact, there was more meetings this year than last. There's more offsite events than have ever existed before from that lens of things. Um, and so that piece was buzzing. Now, part of what I think has changed is there was less meetings in hotel lobbies, so the lobbies were more empty than ever before. At least, from an overall standpoint, there were certain days, certain moments when it was very full. Uh, but a lot of these companies had different event areas, different buildings they took over. And it kind of makes sense because San Francisco has kind of struggled post COVID. There's a lot of empty buildings. And so a lot of folks have turned those into essentially flexible event hall spaces. And so folks like Epic or Exola or others have taken over entire large spaces, and essentially those become places where you just work out of and you take meetings out of. And and they're pretty lenient on allowing people in and things like that. And so it's like really moved outside of the Moscone Center. And I also heard like there were certain talks that were just heavily packed and others that weren't. I think they utilized less of the Moscone Center um, than previously. So it gave the appearance that, oh, it was super packed in certain areas. But I'm like, they're not utilizing the whole space.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we saw that on the expo hall. The expo hall was a fraction of the typical size, and they were handing out um, space to folks to try to fill it, trying new programs, which is great. Like, I think it's good that they're trying new things, but also it's a tough sign because so much of the traffic is happening outside of GDC and
Yeah.
attaching on. And that creates a lot of tough dynamics for their event. And then the attendance numbers, to be honest, I don't trust even those numbers that they were that high. I think they were way less. For example, I had 3 tickets in to the show, via my different organizations,
Mm,
nonprofit, like all that kind of stuff I'm part of. I guarantee you those 3 tickets are part of the numbers, despite me being one person.
sure.
And so I struggle to even believe that it's 2,000, or sorry, 20,000. Also, I mean, running events, it's never a round number. Like,
Yeah.
truly, it's never like you don't just like conveniently go from 30,000 to 20,000. Uh, so I just struggle with some of that, and I think it's a bit deceptive, and I also just don't appreciate that in a certain light. But at the same point, I think they put on a good show. They did a heck of a lot of work, and you know how hard these shows are to put on. And so they deserve a lot of credit for that. I think they have to look elsewhere though, and that's one of the big struggles moving forward.
Yeah, and I should say I say this all the time on the show, but when I have conversations like this, pretty much every conversation that I have is all about sort of constructive criticism, right? Like I'm not
Mhm.
throwing any shade. GDC's never been
Yep,
bad to me or
yep,
anything. I've worked well with them. I was a speaker this year, um,
yep.
but I think there is a reality, and I'm kind of curious your thoughts. My takeaway on the festival of games part, and again, this is just my opinion, so you can take it for
Yeah,
whatever it's worth, but it really struck me as GDC being like a large kind of corporate entity trying to do a more festival style thing, and it really gave the impression they didn't quite know what to do. They did some like
yeah,
logo changing and tried to have 80s
yeah.
music playing in the lobby or whatever, but it didn't seem like they knew how to do that kind of show. And even from the sense that like you're doing a festival of games, all the games were like shoved back into the right of the expo
Yeah.
hall.
It feels out of touch, um, and performative in a way. Now, I do think that there was good intent behind it. Like, I
Sure.
don't think there was like any kind of negativity in how they're going about it, but they just feel out of touch with where they're at. And one of the things I saw a lot of conversation around, and I completely agree with, is they just don't know who they're targeting. They're trying to target everything, and the reality is they can't target everything. No show can. And so I'm very curious to see who they focus in on in the future. Because so much of the success that I heard around the show was from the business end, and the business end is not in the show. And so how do they get, if that's the angle they want to go, like how do they get it? And I'm cheering for them to succeed because I think it is an incredibly valuable show.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
it's why I'm critical of certain aspects, because I think we as an industry, like, it hurts us to not have it. Now, I'm also not a believer, like, oh, if it goes away, we're all screwed. No, like, E3 went away, we're not screwed. Something else jumps in, something else grows, other approaches, more regional shows. We're seeing all the regional shows grow, and GDC's, I think, getting pulled away. So why is that? What more could they do to engage those folks? Obviously, they also face a lot of other challenges this year that further, I think, hurt them. But I do wonder, like, what are they going to do to make a larger adjustment? And I'm not sure, like, trying to make it a show about indie games when most indie devs cannot afford to go to the show. Like 99% cannot afford to go to a show like that in San Francisco, at least. And so if it's going to be about them, they really have to consider where they're doing it, ticket prices, how they're approaching everything. So I think it's the classic case of, like, who do you really serve at the end of the day? Like, who is your target for the show? And I'm not sure that they really know, and they're trying to cover all the bases, and I think that's going to be really tough to do.
Yeah, I think you hit a couple of very astute points there. This, to me, there are a lot of red flags here, similar to E3, where E3 was a retail show. It had coasted on its prestige, like the inertia of the show for so long, that when particularly the digital marketplace started opening up and a lot of these retailers were really struggling against, your Amazons and whatever, E3 just had trouble getting enough folks into the show. And so they opened it up to a general audience. At first, the traditional companies got free tickets and they could kind of give them out to their fans and stuff. And then they started selling audience tickets. But this feels very much like that. And to your point, I don't know how much they can adjust. I know they had various discounting, but I think the standard ticket was like $1,400 or $1,200 non-discounted. That's not counting your travel. That's not counting your hotel room at $300 a night. That's not counting your food. I paid.
300.
Yeah, yeah. That's the thing. I'm going on the sort of small side here.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, I went to
So you're
Chipotle and paid. Yeah, I paid $20
yeah.
for a Chipotle tacos there, which in the Midwest would be absolutely outrageous, right? Um, and so like your small studios just don't have the ability to afford that. And I don't know if they can work out a deal with San Francisco or whatever. I know they're supposedly committed to San Francisco for at least one more year. If they can get enough financial breaks on their fees to be able to lower the tickets enough to be in the point. And the other thing I noticed, that I'm curious as sort of a industry vet like you, I noticed a lot of the usual suspects weren't there. A lot of the studio heads, a lot of the creative directors for AAA and AA studios. There was a lot of folks who just were not there this
Yep.
year that normally would be.
Well, and why would they be? What the purpose of them being there versus the cost, and also the fact that, like, they're all scrambling to even know if they're going to have, like, a studio and jobs and things within their own studio, even if they have a highly successful title. Like, their focus has to be on the products being put out. The idea, like, of GDC being this place you can come and learn from one another and network and whatnot. There's so many other places you can network. are you really getting learnings from GDC that you couldn't get on the internet? Uh, and so like what is the clear value that you're getting from the show? And I think that part of the reason we're seeing less of those is it wasn't a clear value that they were getting, and so they drop out and they focus in on, well, survival of studios and getting out the best products. And it's sad in a way because I think part of what the actual value of GDC is actually exposure to other ideas, other approaches, other ways of thinking about this industry. And but that's like, it's not necessarily something you would pay for, but it is actually the largest thing you get out of it. So it's like one of those things that's hard to really sell because, like, how do you sell this idea of like, oh, by going to this place, you're going to get exposure to new ideas? It's kind of like the actual value of like universities and things like that.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you get classes, but the reality is you get exposure to a bunch of other people. You have to figure out how to work with other people. You have to figure out, a new system. Like all those learnings are what brings like tremendous value. And so I just don't think they see the value of it. And a lot of them come from other places outside the US, and the US obviously being a hard place. Like even if it wasn't hard, like I think Canadians have like an easier time getting it. Just the idea that it could be harder, or the idea that there's restrictions, or the idea that it's less convenient, makes it less likely that they're going to attend some of those things. And so, yeah, I saw less. Although there were plenty at the offsite type events, the type of business events I was going to, the executive dinners, things like that. There was a lot of those, but they definitely weren't on the show floor
Mhm.
at all.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think even like Dice, which we went to Dice last year, but we didn't buy a ticket. Like with three of us went, one of us bought a ticket because the tickets there are like $3,400. But
Yeah, they're ridiculous.
yeah, but we were able to just set up in the bar. And as
Yep.
people walked by, I mean, I bumped into Jonathan Blow going to the bathroom, and I was just like, "Oh, hey, man, you want to come have a drink?" And he hung out with us for a bit. I was trying to corral, 8 people into a taxi to go have dinner one day, and I turned around and like, boom, right there was like Mark Cerny and Shuhei Yoshida, and like, so, being able to bump into those things are cool. I definitely felt this year, the panels I was in, the mentorships I did, there was definitely a sense that like I was like one of the professionals in the room. And I'm like, in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh shit, man, if I'm one of the professionals in the room, like we're in trouble here. Like it just seemed like a lot of folks were coming to trying to figure out what to do. How do I start out my indie studio? How do I make these connections so I can be successful? Um, and I don't think you can survive on like the sort of entry level folks for a show
No,
that large.
no, and to be brutally honest, they are there out of ignorance. They think it's going to get them something that the reality is it's not. It's not going to get them a publishing deal. It's not going to get them a job in the current end of the industry. Like the 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 really tough reality that I'm having to say more often, and I hate saying it because I want our industry to be inclusive. I want our industry to have less gates. Is and somebody entry level coming into this industry is competing against 40,000 people with experience that will accept almost the same salary, and same role title to and they have experience and they've been in the system and they've been in some of these things. And so it's really tough right now. Now it doesn't mean that you can't get in. I think you have to just approach it differently. And I don't think going to GDC is the place you're going to suddenly get those things.
Yeah.
Now going to a regional show, yeah, because you can develop relationships. Like it's so hard at GDC because there's so much going on, everyone's running between meetings. So even though like some of the people you want to talk to are there, they have no time. And networking is really tough, and they are there to get some business done. Whereas some of the regional shows are a little bit more casual, a little bit more relationship focused. They have different factors around, maybe that person really cares about ecosystem building or things like that. And so, being able to connect with folks like more locally, And I think that's why, things like our show in Madison, MDev, has grown, you know, now 500% over the last 5 years. MIGS has grown, DevGam has grown. Like, a lot of shows that I had never heard of before, like a year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that are now like growing like crazy. And in fact, so much so that like MDev, because we just we have like really core focus. Like we just focus on the games industry. I think that's a benefit in the moment. From a game industry only event, we're now the largest in the U.S. outside of California, which is really like pretty crazy to think about that an event in Madison
What
can
was your
do that.
attendance last year?
1,500 people.
Oh man, we bigger than you, homie.
Well, yeah, but you're not. But you do consumer too.
We do
We
consumer,
don't.
yeah.
Yeah, we don't do any consumer pieces to it. It's purely
Yeah.
industry.
No, I think that's again a very astute point too, where just being honest, GDEX trying to balance those two scales has been tricky. And one of the biggest, we're trying something new this year. We're gonna see how it goes. Uh, the price point for tickets, for example, between those two audiences is vastly different. So
Yes.
we're having an expo portion and a conference portion with two different ticket types, but the price difference, because people who want to just kind of go to particularly the retro gaming market, they're very sticklers. Um, they're not used to paying two, three, $400 for a
Exactly.
pass. And it's been challenging. And then we also, because I don't think you guys don't bring in artists, right? We've done some artists. We don't do it. We usually do like 20 artist tables.
We've done in the past, but we again, like we've continued to focus in on we serve the games like industry.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not about the consumers. It's about creating exposure, networking, education for games industry focus folks. So that has allowed us to really narrow the scope, think about how we serve those in the best way. And then, yeah, like from a ticket price, like we have a completely reasonable ticket price for a games industry event. Like it's
hmm
250 full price, 150 early bird, which for a games event is extraordinarily low.
totally.
And so, but you're absolutely right. The balance between what consumers that want to come to experience a games event versus industry, it's a completely different, two very different things that are really hard to balance.
Yeah, yeah. Our most expensive ticket this year is $350 non-discounted. Like they're on discount now for early bird. Um,
Yep.
and we're testing that because I think that's about, particularly given the economy and stuff, that's about as much upward pressure as I think you're going to be able to get. But
Yep.
$350 for a consumer show, PAX is an exception because that thing's massive. They can charge whatever it is, $120 a day or whatever.
But I think they're struggling too. Like, and
Yeah.
they're just consumer. And then for like someone like me, bringing a game, the problem with PAX is you get no wish lists from PAX. You get no, like, the value of being there is pretty minimal from a ROI perspective. It's really hard to justify unless you're brand building. If you're brand building, yeah, awesome event, because that is where fandom happens. That's where you can really grow. Like Larian is a great example of somebody that does stuff at PAX, and
hmm
it completely makes sense. They are constantly like engaging fandom, and if you're doing that and you have the IP to do it, awesome. But if you have an unknown IP, unknown game, indie game, like it's a real struggle because you're not going to stand out. You're not going to get wish lists. You might get 10 wish lists.
Totally. And even
So
Larian, they were on early
yeah,
access for like 3 years. So it made
yeah,
sense too to be, because that was a part of their development plan.
yeah, and they have the funds to do something like that, to invest. Essentially, you think about it like this: you're investing in your audience for future financial growth because your audience gets further engaged. And it has to match the game too. That the game actually has the ability to continue to monetize your audience over time. I could be wrong about this, but something like No Man's Sky, like I can't imagine they go to events or things like that, because the reality of their model is you buy the game once and that's it. Like, and which is
Hmm.
awesome. Like from a
Oh yeah,
fan,
totally.
it's great. But from a standpoint of thinking about, okay, if they engaging that audience at an event, well, the folks that are going to be most excited about it have already bought it, have no ability to really pay more towards it. And so it's really hard from a financial perspective to justify doing things like that, because in unless it's towards something in the future, which they obviously have new games coming out and things like that. Maybe that does it, but it's you really have to look at your own scenario and say, does it make sense? Because we just have to really be better at the business end of this and think about, the long term road. Otherwise, the challenge is, like, a lot of these studios aren't, and suddenly that wall comes at you real quick, and you hit it. And if you haven't planned for that wall to hit you at some point, like, it's really hard to recover.
Absolutely. And again, going back to what you said earlier, we're talking about PAX. Like PAX is in Seattle and PAX East is in Boston. Again,
Yep.
not cheap places to be.
Nope.
And so it ends up being really, really challenging. And then, PAX is run by Reed Pop. I don't know how much control the guys have over PAX anymore. So I don't know if things begin to change, but like Reed Pop is also not always known for being the most like attuned to the audience. Um, so I want to jump in. I want to jump into something you said earlier, where you said that a lot of folks are kind of going to GDC with maybe a false understanding of what they can achieve out of it, which again tethers into just the industry in general. But also, we just saw was it yesterday or 2 days ago? Epic announced 1,000 layoffs from Fortnite of all games because Fortnite's not making enough money. Um,
Yep.
the as a teacher, I teach the intro to game design course, and on the first day, I was like, I hate to be the bearer of bad news here, but it's a really rough time to be into the industry. I don't know where it'll be in 2 or 4 years. When you get your associates or your 4 year degree, who knows? But for every position that's out there, there's going to be 10, 20, 30, 40,000 professional developers who have been in the industry for a while that you're competing against. And it's a tough space to be. And just in general, like lose it. Let's say we lose GDC. I just feel like the U.S. I can see the U.S. is hemorrhaging its sort of dominant space in the industry. And I think that's a shame for both the companies here, but also the people here. And I know you and we've been beating the same drum for a decade about trying to find really positive opportunities for our industry in the Midwest and some of these sort of alternative markets. Uh, but I mean, where do you see this going? Because I think we got another couple of years of bad before it starts to get good,
Yeah,
if
I
it
mean,
does start to get
it's
good.
yeah, depends on where you are, right? Like I'm more the type of person that looks like goes with the wind, I guess. And and watches where it goes. I don't try not to resist it too much. There's times when I will, but at the same point, it it is tough for the California developer right now. And I don't see that improving anytime soon, if ever. I think a little bit of it's an end of an era where we were very focused on very few places in running this industry, and now it's broadened. And so, for many places, this is an incredible era. Game jobs are coming to new places, and there's huge opportunity. And those that jump at it, react fast, and give incentives to come to these places, or really engage in work in different ways or more inclusive ways. This is an incredible moment to build up like the next hub, the next place, the next, like, whatever way of working are all being built right now. And so I just look at it as, like, it's bad for some, it's good for some, and the dynamics are changing. And I think there's a huge opportunity in the Midwest. And what we have to separate ourselves from is this idea of the California expense being the US expense. And it's very different. The dynamics in like a place like Wisconsin are more akin to some of the lowest cost regions to be able to actually get high quality talent. There's always a lower cost region of like, obviously there's one out there that is the lowest of the lowest cost, but also that tends to be a place that doesn't have as high quality talent. Not that it can't become that, because I think rapidly these places are becoming that. But even in the way of operating with a North American entity, for example, they have a hard time bridging the gap because of different cultural nuances or just ways of working that are vastly different. Now we are so quickly becoming such a global society that those gaps are being reduced down, but the Midwest has an opportunity to really capture a lot. But we have to get incentives. We have to really sell ourselves well and highlight things well. It's something I'm thinking about a lot with Wisconsin Games Alliance. How do we sell the Midwest in better ways? We're trying to look at a delegation going to Gamescom, for example, because we should be doing things like the Nordic regions does. You go to these events and you see Nordics, like, and you see like, oh, like this is the Canada, area. This is like they do a good job of really representing that. We don't have any of that in the U.S. And so we need to think about how we represent ourselves, and we can't take it for granted because it really requires us to try to do this in just a better a more inclusive way. We can't take we have to get rid of our privilege that we've had for a long time and embrace the fact that we need to be a bit scrappy with what we're doing.
Yeah, I like that last little sentiment. I say that all the time, which I think, again, a lot of American business, the corporate world, even society has coasted again on inertia. And I think a lot of people, obviously, without getting too political here, we're in a very tumultuous political climate. And I think a lot of people are not taking into account how much privilege we've had by being the center of business, English being the language of business. Um, and I mean, people make fun of Hollywood. I see this all the time, particularly like, there's all this like anti-Hollywood pushback, but I was like, Hollywood is probably the single biggest factor for pushing American culture across the globe. And people think fondly of us because of the movies and the cinema and the experiences that they're attached to. But that's beginning to change. And we've unfortunately pushed that. And then you couple that with the costs of doing business in America. It's, a lot of other people are just beginning to ask what other opportunities can we go? And I do like we have talked about doing a Ohio booth, like New York had a New York booth at GDC. There was a Spain one, and I think like a Portugal one, and whatever. But we've thought about doing an Ohio one, and we've tried to raise funds to advocate for that. And that's something that Garrett and I actually talked about 2 weeks ago. That we're going to kind of try to light a fire up under our economic development people here in Ohio. So I'll let you know how that goes, because if so, we might be able to couple resources and hit some of these shows together, and be able to showcase what games we're working on,
Yep.
and whatever. Because I think it makes a lot of sense, and they always say like what 90% of the battles just showing up or whatever, like being there, showcasing what we're capable of, what our developers working at. I mean, hell, at GDC we had 4 of our portfolio companies there, and I don't have the final rundown, but somewhere between 40 to 50 publisher meetings between the 4,
Mhm.
possibly more. Um, I don't know if that will lead to anything. It's like it's such a bad
Double
turnaround
down.
these days, but like one of our games won the Pocket Gamer Connects competition, so that was cool. Like we're seeing some successes from our portfolio studios, but they would not have been there if it wasn't for like what Garrett and I did for the
Yep.
accelerator and the incubator and GDEX. Um, and to be honest, like it took a lot of time and effort. You're always, it's hard to like figure out your actual financial contribution to these things when it's 3 a.m. and you're working and you're like just trying to make everything work, right? But um, all in all, over the past 2 years, if you look at the grand scheme of how much money we have spent, it's really not that much when you look at other industries and their attraction programs, like the billions of dollars that are spent to attract, like an Intel, like we have an Intel plant that, took forever to get going and now it looks like it's not even going to be built. And it's just like for a fraction of that money, I'm speaking to the choir here, but for a fraction of that money, um, what would you think if we went and did a PAX, a Gamescom, a Tokyo Game Show, and maybe like London's Game Festival plus a GDEX and an MDev? I mean, 500,000, we could probably do some pretty cool stuff there, right? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, if you create partnerships, I think the biggest piece of this is it's around collaboration. Unless you like the reason like something like New York can do their own space is they have an incentive program through the state and dollars associated with it to be able to do some of those kinds of things. If you don't have that, it's around collaboration. So we need to create strong partnerships with both companies that are putting on different events, different showcases, all that kind of stuff. They always are willing to engage, especially with like regional folks, because the value of what we can bring is we can bring attendance to these things. We can bring the right people in, and that's what they're
Sure.
looking for. As long as you can bring those things in and bring value to it, there can be an exchange that is not monetary, and you can do a lot with a little. And we do a lot of that with Midwest Games. We are looking to do more with the Wisconsin Games Alliance around that as well, because we can bring people, we can bring exposure, and there's lots of folks that are connected to our ecosystem. When we put on a Midwest anything, a lot of people show up, and so that's the value. But we have to be good at creating alliances and partnerships, and be willing to engage, and then and really focus in on like what are the most important shows, what are going to get us the most exposure, and whose audience we're trying to go after to sell some of these things. For me, I think about it from the standpoint of like, where's the money coming from? And the money is coming from either investors or publishers. So how do we get in front of those folks, get them aware of the region, get them exposure into some of the studios, some of the things happening within it? Because the more exposure they get, the better they are. And similar to you, like we had 3 studios that we sent on the Wisconsin Games Alliance behalf to GDC, got featured at the show. They were able to create a lot of connections with that, and that's valuable. Do I think that there's going to be publishing deals out of it to start? No, like so much of it is you have to build trust. It takes a long time, but that's a starting piece of it. So I think, like to my point earlier, like going there and expecting you're going to get a publishing deal or you're going to get a job, I don't think you will. But it's a start down the road as well. So there is a value. It's just it's going to be a future value that we're not yet, like it's not going to be immediate. And I think a lot of people think that there's like immediate rewards, and that talking to a publisher means there's interest. Publishers, like, even if they have no spots, like some of their scouts are just told to continue to look, and so they're just taking a lot of meetings. They're all very nice people, there's no ill intent, but there's also 100,000 game development studios that are out there. And
Mm-hmm.
there's like 300 to 400 publishers, and at any given show there's way less than that. So
Yeah.
it just becomes a challenge, and there's a volume and scale challenge that every publisher has.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I don't say learned, but definitely was reinforced when I was doing my Senate campaign is that people are always willing to kind of keep you on the hook. There's a lot of times they won't say no because they're in their mind something might pop up in the future. And so there's always like these conversations that will keep going, but don't always like lead to something. Now, some of that's just part of the natural getting to know you, right? Like we're building a relationship. We just met. I'm not going to throw $1 million at your game right now, but some of it too is just like for them, it really is a publisher's world right now. So they can just hang around and keep seeing what's coming down the pipe. They're in no great rush. You know, they don't necessarily have aligned incentives, right? They have a different needs than a lot of the studios do, which then, of course, moves into the fact, and I'm sure you deal with this all the time, but just the barrier for even being considered by a publisher is so high right now. Like, I mean, back in my day, you didn't need a vertical slice for everything. And now, if you don't have a vertical slice, that's almost like step one in having some of these conversations. And it makes it challenging for people to get going because, I think that there was a talk at GDC where I don't know who it was. But they talked about how the video game industry is really bad at like reusing things. We have a tendency to just keep starting from scratch every time we make a new game, and
Yep.
it makes it difficult. And I don't know if Unity and Unreal will help with any of that, because even then, these companies, they say like, we're using Unreal, like CD Projekt Red is using Unreal for the next Witcher and Cyberpunk, but like that thing is so heavily modified that like it might as well just be its own thing. Um, well,
Totally. We're in an iteration business. And yet we invest and we support like iteration doesn't matter. And it's like we're seeing the end results of some of that kind of decision making of like, studios going out of business, things not being optimized. Many studios that were invested in by venture capital failing because they never got a chance to iterate. They never got a chance to build. And even the ones that did it, I think, right, like they built systems that are meant to be like create longevity. They still don't get the runway to be able to do it. They maybe never even put out the title. And so all that work goes to nothing because it's just been completely mismanaged. And as much as publishers get a lot of grief, guess where the stability still is? It's within publishing. And there's a reason why they're pulling back. And it's not illogical. In fact, it is completely financially sound for why they're doing what they're doing because they realize that most playtime is not with new games right now. That could change, but right now it's not. So why would you invest more when 13% of playtime every year is to new games? Like it would make no sense to do that. Like I mean, talk about like 80-20 rule, like even less than that. Like you should focus your time on where your opportunity is, and publishers understand that. Publishing systems to manage titles and choose titles and do all the things. Uh, I think people haven't acknowledged it, but VC has shown even more why those things matter tremendously because they didn't do any of those systems. They didn't understand what it was. And look at how they just completely fumbled when trying to invest a tremendous amount of money into this industry. And I think the discipline has to come back. Um, and publishers understand how to do it, and that's why they're pulling back and being ridiculously selective. So to your point around the struggle with it, is you have to be able to show traction of some kind. So you have to get yourself there. Now, the challenge that I see with it, and part of the reason we're doing the models that we're doing and kind of trying to reinvent the publishing model, is that if you do the work to get the traction, the value of the publishing, while still tremendous, goes down in value in comparison because you already have some traction. You already have some wishes. You already have some social following. You already have whatever it is, you user testing data. But I still would always argue having a publisher is still better than trying to go it alone. But where's the middle ground? And that's really what we're trying to get to is how do we open up that funnel more? Now, opening the funnel, like for us, like means like how can we get 5 to 6 to 7% of games to have publishing support? Right now, it's like 1.7% of games that have publishing support. So opening the funnel, as much as like 5% doesn't seem like a big percentage, it's a dramatically larger percentage than what
sure.
it is right now. And so I'm trying to focus in on that to start because if we can achieve that, we can then come up with other ways to open the funnel even more. No matter what, the volume of titles and the ability to easily put out titles means that there's going to be the vast majority of titles that don't have publishing, and almost all of those fail massively. Like, you look at all the data, and that 1.7% that is publisher driven or publisher backed dev work um, is generating 2/3 of initial sales still. So even though publishers, again, like, are getting crap for not investing as much, they're still making 2/3 of the revenue off of initial sales. And then you add in like microtransactions, things that are not traceable in any data systems, especially Steam. They're making 90+% of revenue. It wouldn't surprise me if they make 95% of revenue when it really comes down to it. Like, and so they are winning, and we have this perception that they're not, because indie is growing their slice of the pie within the 13% of new games. So they're getting 1/3 of the 13%. And I'm like, it's only because big publishers are pulling back. It's not because they're actually winning more. They just are an increasingly larger slice of the pie. So they're getting higher amounts, but they're not necessarily making more money. And the ones that do win are like the top 10, top 20 of those. Like, the rest get nothing. And even the fact that, Steam put out this at GDC, this data slide around the amount of games that have made $100,000 over their lifespan, but in 2025, that has gone up higher than ever before, while not acknowledging that in their own chart, the amount of games that are on their platform have almost tripled in the same time span from 2020 to 2025. Like, it's a very deceptive, and unless you understand the underlying data and the fact that most of the data is not accurate and is not inclusive of everything. Like, don't have a good data system on the premium end of games in PC console, because most of the data is hidden.
Yeah, I was just having a conversation yesterday about the NPD numbers, and because that used to be like our heartbeat numbers for the industry, and once things started going digital, like, they just couldn't properly keep track of any of these metrics, because it's what you talk about, like, sort of deceptive. I'll poke at Xbox for a little bit, but they've gotten better. I'll get them. But in the Xbox One era into the early Xbox Series X and S era, I mean, their numbers, you'd always have to be very, very careful about what Xbox says, because they would phrase things in very specific ways that wasn't always faithful. Well, we've got a few minutes here. Let's talk about some positive stuff. I mean, both you and I have been in our little Midwest bubbles trying to help people be successful. So what are some things you're doing, and what are some things we can do, both through MDev and GDEX, but just in our work in general? Like, how do we move this needle in the way that you are excited to move into the future?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of positive happening in just different ways. Now, there's a struggle in, obviously, jobs and kind of the existing systems changing, but that creates so much opportunity, so many different ways of working. So, the ability to access more project-based work is something that I'm really focused on right now. Of, like, how could we give people, like, flexibility to be able to work with me on a project, but then also work on anything else they want to work on as well, and have flexibility, be able to earn from multiple different places, but then we make it easy for them to be able to access that kind of work, and be able to access it from wherever they want to be working as well. And so I think, as much as there's a pushback against remote first from some of these large corporations, I think they will lose that battle long term. And it really feeds into kind of the Midwest, of the fact that, you can, like, both from a company and an individual perspective, work and live in a place you want to be, in a higher quality of life location, and yeah, you're paid less, but from a, equation standpoint, actually, it's more than you'd be making if you were living in San Francisco at the end of the day.
Hmm.
So that's really exciting, and the fact that we're seeing, more folks wanting to come to the middle of the country to engage in work discussions, networking, things like that. So that's really exciting to me. The fact that like MDev, we were pulling people from Europe and from Asia to come to Madison, Wisconsin. Like that historically has not been something that anyone would consider, and suddenly that's a reality. Is it a huge reality yet? No. Like we still like there's a tremendous amount of growth, but we're starting the trickle, and that trickle can turn into a flow of folks coming. And so that part is super exciting. I've never seen so much momentum. We've been working on a tax incentive in Wisconsin. It doesn't look like it's going to get through this round of things, but there's some further changes happening within some of the with elections and whatnot coming up that should further help us kind of sell through what this can be. If we can get a tax incentive in Wisconsin, it puts pressure on all the other Midwest states as well to like match up.
Yeah.
And if we do that, like that could turn into a whole like, okay, awesome. There's a whole region that has a bunch of talent, that has incentives. And there's a lot of people that I would say are like set like in a way like ghost living in the Midwest. They won't say it, they won't put it on the socials, they won't do it, but they're actually living in the Midwest, working for these giant companies. And they've gotten either special permission or they just, the companies don't realize fully that they're spending most of their time in the Midwest, and being able to access that talent in larger ways, I think is going to become attractive to some of these companies. So I think that's a very positive effect on the region. And I think even though there's pushback against like this change, I think ultimately the change will win out in the long run, especially as leases and other things start to expire longer term with some of these companies on the West Coast. That's why they're forcing people back to work.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let me know if you need any help or advice on the tax incentive thing. I was one of the people that helped get that passed in Ohio for the film and video game tax credit. Um, so I can give you whatever brain juice I
Yeah,
have that
that's
could
going
be.
to be specific to the video game industry. ESA is helping us push it forward.
Okay.
So the great thing is, like, I think you probably see the challenges a little bit of like some of these incentives are designed, around film to start, and then they include, kind of interactive,
Hmm.
and then games can kind of fit into that. Whereas this one, we've taken an approach of like, no, we're not including anything film, anything TV. This is a specific video game tax incentive. So if we can think through that, that has helped us create a much better incentive model that is based around what we're trying to do in the games industry. But also, it's the challenge is people are less familiar with it because they've seen entertainment tax credits, but they haven't seen a specific video game tax credit. So that's luckily the ESA is helping us with the lobbyists and whatnot. But yeah, it's something we should definitely work, in connection with, and then also like share what we have put forward, because that might be ammo for you to put forward as well. I know Illinois has copied what Wisconsin's done, and they're starting to try to do it themselves as well. And so there could be, additions with that. And really, it's like the first state to do it gets the biggest reward potentially.
For sure. All right, man. Well, we're getting close to the end here. Is there anything that you want to let folks know about? How can they keep track of you, reach out to you? Anything about MDev you want to let folks know about?
Yeah, so MDev, we're going to announce it coming up here, but yeah, it's going to be almost exactly the same time frame as last year. It's going to be November 6th and 7th, and then we're going to have a kickoff event at the Orpheum on day one, or the night of day one, and 2-day event. And then, from a Midwest Games angle, we have Tomb Water coming out, studio in Columbus, Ohio. Bob,
A GDEX Best in Show winner.
yep, exactly. That's where we found them. It's been an incredible partnership. Max has a phenomenal game. It would not surprise me in the least if it wins awards for what it is, 2D Souls-like Western. It is a really special game. That game will come out March 31st. And so definitely go buy, review. All of that goes a long way in helping to support Max and their title over at Moth Atlas. It's a two-person studio, so like really makes a huge difference to get that. Any kind of support. Reviews are so important in the moment. Um, and so we have some cool bundles and things as well. Like there's just a lot of content. Like just the size of the game is enormous for an indie game. You're talking 20 to 30 hours of content,
Oh Lord.
plus playability. It's crazy.
Awesome. Yeah, I should reach out to them. I haven't talked to them in a while. Maybe get them on the show. We can do some promotion through the GDEX channels. But yeah, that was a really cool game. It was one of the games. I don't remember, was it 2 years or 3 years ago when they won? But it was one of the games.
3 years.
Yeah, everyone was talking about when we were doing
Yep.
the Game Awards. They're like, "Have you seen Tomb Raider?" I was like, "Yeah." So
Yeah. Well, the funny thing about that was we saw them, and I don't know if you remember this, but I remember it distinctly. I walked by this. It had the longest line, and like it's two guys. He's got his sign with a broomstick on a mic stand, and and it just was great. Like everyone loved it. They had just an incredible demo. They were listening to every piece of feedback that was coming in, even the stuff that was ridiculous. And it was awesome to see. And we were very fortunate to be able to partner with them on this and support them over the last few years. We came up with a really unique arrangement with them. And so it's cool to be able to see this come to fruition. And I know Max and I were just chatting the other day, and I really have appreciated our partnership. He's appreciated the team. He's going to miss working with a team, which is always nice to hear, right? Like it's great to hear when someone enjoys just the weekly grind of trying to make this thing the best possible thing, and the fact that at the end of the day we can be partners in it and really try our best to do as best we can possibly do in this market.
absolutely. Well, let's go out on a high note then, Ben. So, thank you for being on the show. Really appreciate it. It was good seeing you, if not briefly, at GDC. And hopefully we'll get to see each other before GDEX and MDev. But I plan on being out to MDev this year. And I'm sure we got lots of side conversations we need to have in the meantime. So, but thank you so much for being on. This has been episode 99 of the Sandbox.Space weekly podcast. A reminder, we do this every Wednesday. I normally say at 10 a.m., but this was a special case. We may be adjusting the time in the future, but we'll also post this video on YouTube if you were not able to catch it live. And then we also have some GDEX information, some news coming up. I keep saying that every week. I'm just waiting for a couple of things to be figured out before we announce those, but super excited about that. But yeah, on behalf of myself, Baby, Pumpkin, everybody in the chat, our special guest Ben, I want to thank you all for watching, and we will see you next week.